That moves us to item 10 on our agenda, which is the approval of the minutes of the October 9th, 2023 board meeting. Do I have a motion? Mr. Hogan.
I'd like to make the motion that we approve the minutes of the October 9th, 2023 board meeting.
Do I have a second? Ms. Snipes, any discussion? All right, seeing none, I will take that to a vote. All in favor? That motion carries 6-0 with Mr. Scully stepped out, so I guess one abstention. It's my understanding we do not have public participation tonight on number 11. All right, so that moves us to the action agenda, action as necessary or appropriate on matters discussed in executive session. Do I have any motions? Ms.
I move
Huddle.
that, and I forgot the line numbers.
So,
Okay, you do it. You got the line.
go ahead.
I'd like to make the motion the board approve selected. I'd like to make the motion the board approve selected employment items to approve selected employees number 2 through 13
Do
on
I
the
have a-
provided list.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
I heard Ms. Barnhart first. Ms. Dr. Ross, yes.
Yes, this is the recommendation of administration to go through from 2 to 13. Employee number 1, we were able to handle in another matter.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. Any other discussion? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All in favor? That motion carries 6-0 with one abstention. Do I have any more motions? Ms. Huddle?
I move that we approve up to $50,000 additional Title I and/or Title II funds for professional services from Novell Generation LLC.
Do I have a second? Mr. Hogan, any discussion? All right, seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All in favor? That motion carries 6-0 with one abstention. Do I have another motion?
Yes, ma'am. I move that we approve $8,000 in Title II funds for professional development from Giesich and Associates for Chapin Middle School.
Do I have a second? Mr. Hogan, any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All in favor? That motion carries 6-0, one abstention. I believe that's all of the motions unless I'm, all right. That is all of the motions under executive session. Next on our agenda is the approval of the June 30th, 2023 fund balance analysis and assignment recommendation. Do I have a motion before we start the discussion? Anyone? Ms.
I'll give it.
Okay, Ms. Puddle?
I move that we reallocate sufficient funds from the fund balance to bonuses for staff in the amount of $1,300 for all staff and $1,500 for staff making less than $50,000, full-time staff making less than $50,000 a year.
I'll second.
You have a second? Okay. And that's different than the recommendation from the administration?
I mean, it is.
Okay.
As I mentioned last time, I think that we need to leave excess funds in the fund balance to cover operational needs. For example, you know, we just went over the report card and some needs at some of our schools, academic needs. And I'm recommending that we increase the bonuses, particularly for people that make less than $50,000. First of all, I think we should increase them because they've been $1,000 for at least a couple of years and we've had inflation. And then also from an equity standpoint, I think individuals who make, and I picked 50,000 because that's kind of a threshold. It's a threshold that's used for reporting salaries for one thing to the, for FOIA and to the state. Because those individuals, I mean, they work just as hard as everybody else. And I think that they, especially after the tough couple of years we've had, that's well-deserved.
Any other discussion? If seeing, okay.
Well, I'm 100% towards paying teachers. How does this change the district from where they would like to ultimately see this motion go through?
Right, we can make another motion.
We were not prepared for this motion, so we haven't done the numbers on it. We don't know where this would be.
All right, I'll call for the vote. All in favor of Ms. Huddle's motion? All right, all opposed? Are we voting? So, I mean, but we've called for the vote, so we're
Okay.
either, I mean, all right, did you vote in favor or are you abstaining? Okay, so the motion fails. Is there another motion based off of this item, which is, I mean, all right, so the administration has made, has made a request, which is in the recommendation under Exhibit G. So I'm trying to get a motion on the floor so we can discuss it. The recommendation was that the board move to approve the assignment of fund balance, if anyone is looking at their board packet.
Yeah,
So do I have a motion?
sure. All right, I'd like to make a motion that the board approve the assignment of fund balance for fiscal year 2023 general fund as follows. Employee retention incentive, November 17th, 2023 for $3,000,
3 million.
$3 million, Jesus, I'm sorry, and target 2030 5-year master facilities plan for $3,500,000.
Do I have a second? Mr. Scully, all right. Dr. Ross, do you want to lead the request, and then we can?
Yes, I'm going to have our CFO go through why we asked for this fund balance assignment. So Ms. Paul, soon to be Wilkerson.
Thank you. Thank you. So I'm just going to review the slides that we went over the last time, if that's all right. So we'll start with kind of where we are. So this is our audited financial report as of June 30, 2022. And you'll see that our total fund balance as of the beginning of the fiscal year or the end of the previous fiscal year was $51,205,000. We had 3 different categories in that total fund balance that added to non-spendable fund balance of about $4.3 million. This is our inventory and our prepaid expenses. We had assignments from the board that were board commitments from the previous year of about $9.3 million, which left an unassigned fund balance of $38.5 million, which is about 17.9% of the fiscal year 23 budgeted expenditures, which was within board policy. So this took our total fund balance as of June 30th, 2022 to a little over $52 million. Taking a deeper dive into that assignment that again was made at this time really last year. So of the categories that made up that $9.3 million, we had the D5 snack program, the NEST program, employee appreciation gift, which was again $1,000 in November of last year for every employee, every permanent employee. And then we also had Irma High School construction, which was $3.5 million. This $3.5 million for Irma High School was a carryover from the previous year. This actually has been going on for a couple of years now, so the same $3.5 million that has been just really assigned each year by the board. So of those assignments, again, these are unaudited numbers for fiscal year 23, but of those assignments, we did not have to use all of the proposed assignments. So you can see here we used about $4.5 million of the total 9.3, which left an unused amount of 4.7. We also had some other factors that have also increased our fund balance. This is due to collections really over budget, as we discussed last time. The local revenue piece is mostly related to vehicle taxes. So overall, local revenue was about 1.5% above budget. Interest income, of course, is another big factor, and this is due to the interest rate, which we're continuing to see in our monthly financial report. We also had increases to our state revenue of about $1.7 million. This is mostly due to state aid, manufacturer reimbursement, and the Tier 3 increase, reimbursement increase. From the indirect cost transfer reimbursements, we had about $505,000 from federal grants that we did recover. And then additionally, we had some miscellaneous items that came in. This ranged from insurance proceeds, rebates, legal settlements, et cetera, for an overall increase to our revenues of about $5.2 million over our budget. So if we factor all of this in together, this slide really wraps everything up. So to start the year, we were at $52 million. We had assignment uses of about 4.5. Our revenue that was over budget was about 5.2 million. And then we also had some expenditures that came in under budget. That's mostly supplies and contract services. So our new projected fund balance as of June 30th, 2023, again, unaudited, is $54,621,524. Based on our existing trial balance, we do know that our non-spendable fund balance should be about 3.6 million. The already approved assignments are for Irmo High School construction at 2.8 and 6 additional teachers in critical areas of 543,000. Again, that's another one of those items that we may not actually need from fund balance. Due to vacancies and other factors, we may be able to take that on through the general fund, but we just wanted to have that as a placeholder in case. And then the additional assignment recommendations as shown are the employee retention incentive of $3 million. And again, that would be for a $1,000 bonus paid on November 17th. And then our Target 2030 5-year facilities plan of $3.5 million. So the reason that we're requesting that this come out of the general fund balance assignment is due to the fact that we've already maxed out our 8% debt limit on the bond debt service side. So we really don't have anywhere else to pull money for capital projects at this point. As y'all recall, I believe it was in April, y'all approved the bond for $25 million. And this got us to our 8% cap from an assessed value standpoint. That's a state statute where $15 million was for our annual maintenance that y'all approve each year, and then the additional 10 was for Irmo High School. So with that bond, we do no longer have any capacity left to put any additional items in the debt service side. So that's why we're requesting that this move actually from the general fund to capital projects. So overall, recommended assigned fund balance is very in line with where we were this time last year of about 9.9 million, which would keep our unassigned fund balance at 41,054,000, or about 17.6%. So again, that's within our board policy DFAB for fund balance. I'll be glad to take any questions.
Okay. Do I have any questions? Ms. Huddle?
When will we get a presentation from the last CAFR, the audited financial?
So it is due on December 1st. So we have that currently scheduled for the December meeting that the auditors would come in.
Okay, is there an urgency in moving I understand there's an urgency with the bonuses, but is there an urgency in moving? How long would we have to move the capital funds?
In order to get it on the upcoming ACFR, we would have to have that, I would say no later than early November, so that they can wrap it up.
But strategically or whatever, does it have to be on that CAFR? Is there any reason that the board couldn't wait to move?
If it's not shown on that, the annual comprehensive financial report, it would just move into the unassigned. So it would just increase our 41 million by 3.5 million, which would probably take us out of compliance.
Out of compliance?
Well, out of compliance with board policy, where we're supposed to be within 15 to 18% unassigned. So if we move that 3.5 million into unassigned, I would assume we'd be over that 18% threshold.
Okay, but we've
But
been
again,
over
that's
it
board
before.
policy, so y'all can obviously.
We've been over it before, haven't we?
I'm not sure, I don't believe in recent years, but again, it's board policy, it's not like state law or anything like that, so y'all always have the option to amend that.
Dr. Ross, is there a reason why you are putting the $3.5 million where it is right now? And is there an urgency from the district standpoint?
For us, yeah, you will see a presentation this afternoon about our facility needs, and you have received those needs. We do have significant capital issues in this district. Some of these things are not anything we can wait on. I don't know if this is enough, to be honest with you. So there's urgency for us. We do value the employees and their retention, but we also, the environment in which they come to work, in which our students and teachers come to work, is important as well. So we would ask that this go towards those aims. So as our CFO said, Ms. Paul said, we're maxed out on the credit card on debt service side. So our options come from operating side. So that's why this would happen. It would put us in board policy in terms of our reserve at 18%, we'll be at about 17.6% at that point. So that's why we make the recommendation today.
So when you hear the concern about whether or not the fund balance or monies from the general fund should go to capital expenses, I mean, what's the response to that?
So, so there really are not the same. I think the confusion here is that there are restrictions on the debt service side. So the debt service and bonds related to school finance, you can only set your debt service millage to cover the principal and the interest in a potential sinking fund, and that is all that it can cover. So your debt service millage cannot be used, you cannot transfer debt service millage over to operations for any other purpose. You issue bonds for capital needs, but there are not the same restrictions on the operating millage. So operating millages can be used in any means to operate the district. So while there's definitely restrictions to the debt service side, those same restrictions do not apply to the operating millage.
Any other questions on this side? Ms. Huddle?
I move that we defer the decision on the 3.5, that we amend the motion to defer the decision on the 3.5 million move to capital until after we have reviewed the annual CAFR.
All right, any discussion?
The reason that I think we need to do that is we need a full picture of the fund balance, and we also need projections for this current year and what that's going to do to the fund balance. Is this going to keep happening? I also want to read the policy. It said, this average, this is board policy DFAB, it said this average may change from time to time, but generally ranges from 15 to 18% of the general fund budgeted expenditures. I don't think that reads that if we go over 18%, we violated the policy. In fact, I expressed my concerns with that when we raised the millage, and I was told it's all right to go over the 18%. So if it was good then, it's good now. If I understand the reason for this, we've maxed out the 8%, but we're playing a shell game with our taxpayers, and it's not fair to them. We just approved a budget a couple of months ago. We knew this was going to happen. We should have put it in the budget where you have your whole separate meeting that just for the budget, and taxpayers can come and they can voice their concerns. It's just wrong to keep doing this and do it at a meeting where there's nobody here and, probably nobody watching. Let's call a spade a spade. I got no problem with it if we do it the right way, but this is the wrong way. And we can wait until we get the CAFR and we can look at the numbers then.
Mr. Satterfield?
Yes, Dr. Ross, you must have a pretty good idea of a lot of the projects that are waiting for funding. Do you feel like the 3.5 is going to be sufficient for this? Or are you just taking an educated guess and then waiting to hear from?
No, you will see in terms of some of the issues that we're dealing with now, and as we get to item 18, the facilities conditions, I think we've noticed this last week that this was our last board meeting, this is what we're going to do. We have done this every year. You can disagree with what we're asking for, but the administration hasn't done anything wrong. We have stayed at that 15 to 18% for the exact same reason has been leveraged of security for the taxpayer. But we all sit up here, and I'm the only one that didn't take an oath to say that the kids' needs would be first. Those are the needs that are first, and I think the facility issues that we address for these schools have to be addressed. And so when we look at the facilities conditions report, you'll see 3.5 is not going to be enough, but we're already maxed out on the debt service side. So this gives us an opportunity to go at some of these projects, get these things done with your approval.
Mr.
Yeah, I have one other comment. I've sort of made it my mission to go out and visit as many schools as I possibly can. And I was the facilities guy for several years in different schools. And I have seen that there are a lot of needs. I mean, when you have that experience, you can walk through a facility and say, well, look at this, this, and that. I do want to emphasize something that you did say, though, Dr. Ross, and that is whatever plan that we decide, whichever direction we decide to go, we need to remember that these kids and these teachers deserve as nice a facility as we can provide them. And some of them are in disrepair. Some of them need some help. Kids, when they're in an environment that is clean and beautiful, they treat it as such. But if they're in an environment that is in disrepair, or teachers are in classrooms where AC's just not working all year, or whatever it might be, then, they're questioning, why am I still in this district if they're not going to provide the facilities that we need? The only reason I can say that, or the only reason I'm saying is because I used to be that sounding board for a lot of folks in the schools that I worked at when they would have concerns expressed. So again, whatever strategy or direction this board chooses to take, I certainly will support, but I do want to emphasize that our task, our charge should be to put these kids and these teachers in as nice a facility as we can provide them. That's all.
Okay. I'm going to call, hold on, Mr. Hogan.
Dr. Ross, my question for you with Ms. Huddle's amendment to the motion, if the decision was to push to the November 21st board meeting, how far would it put you guys behind?
Well, it wouldn't, it would be the December meeting because that's when they said the audited numbers would come. So it would push them past.
Okay, I thought we were waiting on the facility study.
No, that's tonight.
Yeah, correct, but it's after this vote. So we're waiting facility study and the audited number, so it would be the December meeting.
No, she asked for the audited numbers, which
Okay.
is December. That's what the motion was. Ms. Huddle?
First of all, I totally agree the kids come first. Totally agree. But I'm asking to defer it. We're being asked to make a decision to move $3.5 million before we even know what the $3.5 million is for. Okay? And that isn't, and we're taking it out of things that could go for the kids. We have 2 schools on our report card. I'm begging y'all, and I know personalities get into this for a minute, put that aside, okay? We have 2 schools that scored below average that don't have math interventionists, okay? And I agree, school facilities are important. They're very important, but we don't even know what the needs are there yet. We're being asked to move $3.5 million before we even know what the needs are. Meanwhile, we know we have 2 schools who are scored below average and don't have math interventionists. This money could go for that. That's what it was intended for. It was intended for operating. You shouldn't move it out of operating until you feel like you've done everything you can and you know very clearly what that need is in facilities. And you balance those, okay? Math interventionist versus, whatever it is we need. So I'm just asking you, please, think about it that way. And if the kids truly come first, think about the kids at Crossroads. Think about the kids at Chapin Elementary and our other schools that need help.
Dr. Ross, I believe that you've mentioned in meetings prior to this about that $3.5 million, and you may not have said $3.5 million, but you talked about needing dollars regarding facilities and property. Is that something that you want to discuss tonight or not? And where that $3.5 million is? I'm bringing that up because Ms. Huddle just made a comment about we don't know where it's going.
Right. Well, what we know is, and we will have to come again to, according to our procurement policy, and bring this back to the board to spend it. But it allows us to get about the work of fixing the items that we have identified. These are in your packet. We're going to go over tonight with McMillan, Pasden, and Smith, but we have some issues here that we need to address. I like to say, and I appreciate Ms. Huddle's advocacy, but you heard in our strategic process how we make decisions. We have these team leads. This starts from the teacher level up. That's how we fix these issues. It's not from the board down. You let those closest to the issue determine how best we support them and equip them to meet the needs that they see closest on the ground. That starts with the instructional round data that we get. It starts with those professional learning communities. They work with the principals. They give it to the team leads. We bring you a proposal. These processes are in place. I don't want it to feel that with this $3.5 million going to facilities, that there's nothing going to the aids of students in reading, writing, and the developments that we have in our mission. So again, we have maxed out our capital options. We have capital needs right here on this very agenda. We would like support in addressing these capital needs. I would love to be to the place where we don't have these capital needs. And the very next thing, we work on class sizes. The teachers, and I'll just say this, Madam Chair and members of the board, the teacher advisory is working on a presentation from you of the things that they are needing. They, right here in this room, have outlined 4 areas that they would like to see improvement on. They're working on action steps and measurables for that. Let them bring that forth and from the bottom up and to create a plan of what they need for supports. It's as Dr. Holden said, it's a check on what we see in the data. So we have this in progress where we can support these teachers, but we need that to come from them first, and then we support it there. So that's why we stand behind the recommendation that $3.5 million go to these facility issues. We would then, based on our procurement process, have to bring it back for approval. This doesn't give us a blank check, but it allows us to begin that plan. Madison, is there anything?
I think the only thing that I would add is that we had certainly a lot of requests about math interventionists and math coaches during the budget process. And what we found is that we fund that usually through Title I funds at our Title I schools. So the second we put that in a different school that's not a Title I school, then it's supplanting. And then we have to pay for all of them. And we have to, so it really kind of, it's hard to just fund it, it's out of the general fund because then you run into issues with Title I. So I think there's certainly a need, because again, I heard it at just about every budget meeting that I went to this year. They said, we'd love a math coach, we'd love a math interventionist, because we do have the reading interventionist. And that was just something that we continually had to work with. Well, if we fund it in the general fund, then we've got to go back to the Title I funds and take all of those out and fund all of those out of the general fund. So it certainly is a couple of factors that you have to consider.
For sure. All right, so we have, we have 2 motions on the floor. I'm going to let you go first, but just, I'm throwing that out there. Go ahead. I'm going to go for you, and then I'm going to call the first motion. Go ahead.
I do not support Ms. Huddle's motion to amend and defer. Let's get that money working for our schools and our students. But if the administration would like to later down the line come back to us with recommendations on addressing for additional spending to address the 2 schools that are below average, I'm happy to consider additional funding for that. But let's get this money working now.
All right, so the first motion on the floor is Ms. Huddle's motion to defer the $3.5 million for the facilities plan. So all in favor of Ms. Huddle's motion? All opposed? That motion fails 5-2. And then that brings us to the original motion on the floor for the employee retention incentive and the 5-year master facilities plan. So I will call for that vote. All in favor? All opposed? That motion carries 5-2. And that moves us to item 14 on the agenda, which is the second and final reading approval of proposed revisions to Board Policy IKF Graduation Requirements Exhibit H.
Madam Chair and trustees, we have our graduation requirements for second and final approval, IKF, and our Chief of Academics, Ms. Tina McCaskill, to present.
Good evening, Madam Chair and Board, Dr. Ross. We bring this to you for the final reading tonight. We have the one statement that's really straight out of the regulation to be added to the policy, and we would like to have our final reading.
I'd like to make a motion that we approve the revisions to Board Policy IKF graduation requirements.
Any discussion? I'd like to call for the vote. All in favor? That motion carries 7-0. Thank you for that reminder. All right, thank you, Ms. McCaskill. That moves us to item 15, which is the first reading approval of new board policy JICFB Gavin's Law implementation under Exhibit I.
Dr. Harris, our Chief of Student Services and Planning, will bring this exhibit.
Thank you, Dr. Ross, members of the board and our community. This is a new policy that has been provided to districts like ours across the state of South Carolina, and it's the Gavin's Law implementation, and it's modeled, provided by the School Boards Association, and we bring it forward for first reading approval.
All right. Do I have a motion? Mr. Hogan.
I'd like to make the motion that the board approves the first reading of the new policy JICFB, Gavin's Law implementation, to proceed to the second and final reading at November 13th, 2023 board meeting.
Do I have a second?
Second.
I heard Ms. Barnhart over there. Any discussion? All right, seeing none, I will call for the vote. All in favor? That motion carries 7-0.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Harris. And then that brings us to item 16, which is the first reading approval of proposed revisions to board policy GBEB staff conduct. Do I have a motion? Ms. Snipes?
I'd like to make a motion that we approve the first reading of the proposed revisions to the board policy GBEB staff conduct and proceed to the second and final reading at the November 13th board meeting.
Do I have a second? Mr. Hogan. All right, we have a motion on the floor. Dr. Harris? Dr. Harris, I'm sorry, Dr. Turner.
That's okay. That's an honor to be mixed up. That's a good mix-up. I'll take it. The revisions that we discussed last time was to update board policy GBEB staff conduct. And as you may recall, what we discussed during the last board meeting is that this updates the policy to include references to several board policies now that we have in place that apply to staff conduct, as well as some relevant case law. So the administration did recommend that the board approve the first reading of the proposed revisions and proceed to the second and final reading at the November 13th board meeting.
You knew I was going to raise my hand. I expressed my concerns with this policy the last time at the last board meeting, and I still have those same concerns. I deliberated and went round and round, even tried to write an amendment to this motion, but it was so involved, it was so encompassing, there was too much, really, for me to address with the concerns that I have. I still feel like it's very ambiguous, very difficult to understand, very difficult to implement. If somebody complained to the administration about an employee, I'm not sure how they could interpret this policy to determine whether or not that they had a valid complaint. I just, words like if it impairs the employee's ability to effectively perform or disrupts the school environment or impairs the efficiency of the workplace, I don't even know what that means. But I know that a lot of this is centered around social media. And when I was looking at a rewrite of this policy, I went back and referred to the original policy, and electronic communication is involved in that policy. So, and one other thing, and I know I brought this up the last time, we removed the phrase only, the board will get involved only if it causes a disruption, and we took that out so to imply that if somebody complains to the board, then they can get involved at their discretion on something that should be handled at a school level. This is my opinion. Again, I shared with you all last time, if I was the principal and standing in front of my faculty and I'm trying to interpret this policy, or somebody comes to me and has a complaint or a concern, I want to have something, everything else in the policy is pretty well spelled out. Every other offense or expectation, I won't call them an offense, but the other expectations are pretty well spelled out. And there's a myriad of other things that are mentioned in there, you know, relations with students and alcohol and whatever, but there are no court cases cited for those. The only court cases are cited are for social media. And the court cases that are cited are things that would come up anyway if it got to that point, to where I assume would come up if there was a situation that got to the district office, or when it, you know, came to dealing with the difficulty with an employee. That's my personal opinion on that. Again, I look at it from a practical implementation. If I was the principal trying to deal with a particular situation, I know that a lot of folks use social media. People on our school board use social media. They write personal comments in op-eds. I think teachers and board members and all of us should demonstrate and model those appropriate behaviors. But so that part I agree with greatly. I just struggle with the ambiguity here, so that's just my opinion.
All right, any other, Mr. Scully?
Yeah, and Dr. Ross and Dr. Turner, you can answer just yes or no to this question. I'm going to ask you to, I'm going to try to be vague, but think back to the discussion we had during executive session tonight. Would this policy, were it in place as written, impact your ability to respond to the issues that we talked about tonight, the personnel issues, in any way, or constrain, like tie your hands, or how? Can you answer that vaguely without revealing too much?
This would give us more latitude than the current policy is written. We have, just kind of without overstepping legal advice, we have some limitations in our current one. So I think the goal by citing the case law was to give the administration more latitude in addressing issues. If that makes sense.
The vagueness. Ms. Luttle.
I share Mr. Satterfield's concerns with this. I think it's very vague. It's far more vague than our current policy. I think the policy needs to be, the policies only work, the policies are like laws to our school district, right? And they only work if they're clear. And I'm afraid that all that's going to happen with this is we're going to have a lot more attorney's fees, because every little thing is going to be a call to a lawyer. The policy needs to be clearer about, the old policy is even better than the current one, but I still think we should change it. I just think it needs to be clear. There needs to be a delineation between what happens at school, on school grounds, in front of students, et cetera, and a private life. Years ago, there was a situation with stomping on a flag in our district. I don't know if this policy, and I know it happened, I think it happened on school grounds, but let's suppose it happened at home and somebody, unbeknownst to the person stomping on the flag, videotaped it and it shows up on social media. I mean, I don't know with this policy if that was okay or not. I can't tell that. And so there's going to be and I think it's also going to be very unfair. You know, if somebody complains or somebody doesn't, let's put the brakes on this. Let's get some other lawyers involved, but an ambiguous policy helps no one but the lawyers.
I want to just say, I don't disagree with you at all. I really don't. I think one of the struggles we find, and this is just kind of explaining, when we asked at the last board meeting, I said, let me check and see if there's an R policy where they would have the rules for the administration. There is no R example. I think the issue that we're dealing with is everything's being challenged right now. We're living through, as Mr. Satterfield said, can you stand in front of a faculty and say this is exactly what you should do and exactly what you shouldn't do? And the answer is no. The answer is no. What are we living in? We're living in right now where these are being challenged. One of these hasn't hit the Supreme Court yet. It's still in the Fourth Circuit. So we don't even know where we are in terms of what is allowed and what's not allowed. And that's the difficulty. Even things in our current policy are being challenged. I don't see a way around the litigious society that we sit in. So it was just giving us more latitude with this because I challenge any principal to say this is exactly what you can do in your private life, and this is exactly how it is not going to impact your personal life in today's society as we watch these cases move through the Fourth Circuit or eventually into the Supreme Court. So when I came out of school, it was you just had one test, and it was a case from 1968, and we all studied that. And you mentioned that case last time. Now you have Grutzmacher, which is different and ever evolving. So we find ourselves in a place where we're in kind of this living history of case by case, what is appropriate and what's not, and it's being ever defined by in the current context. So I just want to put that out for context of why we struggle to say this is exactly what it is and what's not, as these are currently being challenged.
So Dr. Ross and Dr. Turner, what I'm hearing is what would clarify or, maybe make this policy seem to work better. I understand why the language is in there because it comes from case law, and I think that that's what the thought process was. I mean, if something gets challenged and it's taken to court, the court's going to look at the language of the policy, and if the language of the policy already acknowledges and recognizes precedent, then it is more likely that we will have handled the situation the right way. I get that, but I also understand and semi-agree with some of the opinions that my colleagues have said. You mentioned the fact that it would make it easier, this policy would be easier if there was an administrative rule that went with it, and there is not an administrative rule for this policy at the School Board Association level or any other districts, and there's been conversation about maybe developing one. So it's almost like it may not be the best idea to change the policy without seeing what an administrative rule does. Because in practice, I'm kind of brainstorming here. I mean, in practice, if we implement this rule and we don't know how it's actually going to work, but we have the plan to develop a rule, maybe we should bring that together and not necessarily push it forward today. I don't know. I'm thinking out loud, and I kind of wanted to get your feedback on that.
Yeah, my feedback goes back to what Ms. Huddle says, and it needs to have that clarity that the existing one has. We are just very challenged because we have to deal with these case by case. And I don't want to misdirect this board to say, if this happens, then this will happen. They're all handled case by case, but what we do, to Mr. Satterfield's point, is we now have to work with that administration. We had our attorney come speak to our principals, and they asked those very same questions. What do we say in this case and in that case? And it was, we're going to handle each one of these case by case, because when we were trained or take the administrative test, Pickering was the standard. Now that's no longer the standard. So you're living in a place where, all right, so Grutzmacher is now the standard, and social media and the speed of that, if I like something or share something or comment on something, I own that speech, and we're, even with, the flag situation, it still wasn't as delicate as the situation that we deal with social media. So I understand the pause until we see in our policy. We will just need assistance in developing that from some legal guide. So we understand the pause from the board. We just will inform you that each one of these we're going to have to handle on a case-by-case basis.
Should I, oh, go ahead.
I wanted to ask if it was okay, because I feel compelled to share the context of some of your concerns. I certainly understand. It is very hard to read personnel policy when you don't live in this world every day. I will tell you, there are never situations where our principals are handed this manual and said, take it, read it, and figure it out. We have a collaborative culture where we actually encourage our administrators as well as our teachers who may find themselves going through this policy. We have open dialogues. I wanted to make sure the context of how we handle personnel issues is clear. It's never a take this, interpret it, know the law, go to law school. It's always, this is the best advice we can give. What they don't understand, we coach them through. What we don't understand, we take legal guidance. One of the things that, one of the responsibilities of HR, because we do frequently deal with this policy, is many of these things may impact teacher licensure. You know, it could impact you being reported to the Department of Education. So there are serious implications to this. And when you touch employment, you have to get it right. It has to be legal. It has to be lawful. So if these things are stated on paper or not, I do want to give the board confidence that it's going to be handled in accordance with the most up-to-date laws that put the district as well as employees in the best position when it comes to their employment rights.
Okay. Mr. Satterfield?
Yeah, I just want to add one other thing, and I appreciate you saying that. You know, a policy such as this, and in these days and times, we can't ignore that either. This could, you know, lead to somebody losing their position or their license. And the other thing we can't ignore is that we're talking about board members, we're talking about teachers and you all, personnel, but we haven't mentioned about all the community members that also look at this board policy. And unfortunately, they don't always see eye to eye with the school board or the personnel or the school for that fact. But I don't know what the procedure is for moving forward or revisiting this, but that's something I would, to have further discussion or to maybe allow Dr. Ross to come up with something, a supplement that would help solidify, I guess for the lack of a better word, this policy. That's what I would appreciate. But I appreciate everybody's input and perspective because that gives me a better understanding as well.
All right, I'm going to call for the vote on this policy, and, yep,
Can I make a,
you can make a comment, yeah.
ask a quick question? Have you reached out and gotten feedback on this proposal from any, I know it's a bad word sometimes, but any of the teacher associations from a professional standpoint to see what their opinions or what their read on it is? I think it would be valuable at least to find out their opinion organizationally, for whatever that's worth. But
No, sir, we work directly with legal counsel, but Dr. Ross can certainly direct us to do some other research as well.
All right, I'm calling for the vote. There's a motion on the floor to approve first reading and to move this policy forward. So all in favor of the policy? All opposed? All right, that motion fails 5-2. And I would welcome conversation about how this policy can move forward in the future and an administrative rule. And so if anybody has any thoughts, just shoot an email to Kimberly and we can put it on the
clarification
agenda.
question?
Yes.
Procedurally, what does that mean? Is the
So that
policy
means
now
that
dead?
this policy did not pass final reading.
So it stops
So
here.
it stops, yes. All right. That brings us to 17, which is the approval for extension for District Review Committee Exhibit K.
Yes, Madam Chair, members of the board, we have under Board Policy KEC, Library Media Center Material Selection and Reconsideration Process. The policy outlines that the members of the committee shall read the materials referred to them in its entirety, pending the review by the committee. The challenged books or materials shall be withdrawn for use throughout the district. The committee shall complete its review and issue a report within 30 business days after receipt of the complaint, and a copy in writing shall be sent to the complainant, the district superintendent, and the local school board. The complaint was received on September 26, 2023, and the 30-day option would bring them to, or 30 business day time period would bring them to November 8th, 2023. As a result of the size of the text and the associated research materials, the text being 656 pages, in addition to the research materials that they are supposed to read, the committee of 9 was polled, and 5 of the 9 members indicated that they would like additional time to review all of the material. As a result, we asked the committee how much time would you need to complete the full text and the associated materials. The answer was to November 30th. This extension would set aside the 30 business day requirement of the policy so that they can meet the shall read all the materials in its entirety part of the policy. And so I stand for any questions at this time.
Dr. Ross? Oh,
I didn't have my thing. I was recognizing Ms. Barnhart, and then I'll
I'm
recognize
sorry.
you. You're okay.
I was,
It's okay.
I have a lot of questions about this. First of all, what is the research material that the committee is going to need to review in regards to this book?
As Ms. McCaskill will share.
So part of the process is for them to read and to look at various reviews about the book and do research on the book as far as age appropriateness, things like that, that they can go to various sites to find those reviews out.
Okay. My second question, this book is 656 pages, and that is the reason that the committee is requesting additional time, am I correct?
Yes, ma'am. If you look at other policies around, there's some districts, they don't have a time policy. The committee agrees on when to come back with that. We've had a review of a much smaller book, and they didn't need 30 days. Our policy specifically puts this 30-day piece on. When you look at the size of that and all of that they had to review, there were 5 members who said they had concerns about finishing it by that 30-day. What we did not want is around any decision, whether to keep the book on the shelf or remove it, there to be any doubt that all members had the opportunity to review all of the materials provided.
Okay. And I understand that. I mean, no disrespect, but I mean, I've read a Harry Potter book in a couple days, so I mean, going from September 26th to November 8th, it looks like our policy is a derivative of this State Department of Education model policy, and that's 15 days. So we're kind of twice as long in our policy as like the Department of Education has the model for. But it looks like within like BGD policy, in regards to the suspension or repeal of policy in emergency situations, I don't really think this constitutes as an emergency situation. In my opinion, and it's just my opinion only, I think that we should go ahead and make a decision unless the person who challenged the material is okay with the extension. But that's just my first couple thoughts on this.
Okay, Ms. Snipes?
I just wanted Dr. Ross to explain to us what the ramifications are from his perspective if we didn't give the extension.
Well, just understand too, that, and I think that's a great question. This is what you will leave to more discussion, in my opinion. We go over, if you were at the first meeting that we had with them, there were 2 cameras, there were 3 news outlets there. There's a lot of attention on this. There'll be more news cameras at the final meeting. And when you have members of the committee that say they want more time to review it, you know, some of them are, I think we had 1 volunteer. Everybody else was asked to be on this. To not consider that. And I know some read faster. right? But this was their request to review this information. I just think it's important to take away that doubt that everyone had an opportunity to fully review the text. You know, this can be appealed to the board, any decision. However, even we have First Amendment obligations. So it doesn't stop with this body. And if an author decided to bring a case against the district, and I'm just trying to do like chess, think a few moves down the road, and it says that, you know, there were concerns that you didn't follow your own policy in allowing the members of the review committee to review all the materials. I just think it's worth the extension to take that argument off the table. And so, again, they're independent for a reason. Some districts don't have a time period because they've received multiple requests. Imagine you have multiple books at one time. So this is coming from your district review committee. And that's why we support that extension.
So, yeah, well, I was just going to say there's not a motion on the floor, so if there's going to be, I was reminding the board that there is not currently a motion. Mr. Hogan?
Dr. Ross, you said earlier that while this book is in the review process, our policy has it removed from shelves and circulation, correct?
That's correct, sir.
Okay, so if this extension was granted, that would continue, those books would stay out of the libraries until the decision's made?
Correct. We had to try to meet that. We only have 3 copies, correct? So we had to buy we had to buy 6 copies of the book so that we could try to meet that, because typically you would just rotate it around. And some districts, that's what they do. If they only have 3 copies, they rotate it around the committee until everybody gets a copy of the book. They don't buy more. We bought 6 additional copies just for that committee there. So the question is, what do we do with all these copies afterwards? So all of these have been pulled, because the committee has them right now.
All right, Mr. Scully.
I move that we approve the extension for the district review committee.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Ms. Snipes?
Point of order. I mean, I'd like to ask the board chair to rule on whether or not we can even have this motion. Ms. Barnhart referenced BGBGD, and I looked it up, and it talks about suspension or repeal of policy, because the policy says 30 days. And it says an emergency situation with, and then it also says a board may also suspend a policy, although such change was not listed on the agenda of the meeting if the favorable vote is unanimous. So I'm just asking for a ruling. Are we considering this an emergency? And if not, do you agree that the vote has to be unanimous? Since we're changing.
Okay, say that again. Okay, say that again.
Okay, I'm asking, do you consider this an emergency? Because that's what suspension, BGBDG requires either an emergency, or it says you may also do it if the vote is unanimous. If it wasn't on the agenda, because this actually says, you know, district review committee, but it doesn't say suspending or the policy. That wasn't on the agenda. So if I read this correctly, it would require a unanimous vote to suspend the policy or change the policy. So I guess I'm just asking for a ruling through a point of order. Do you consider it an emergency? Or if not, do you consider that because that it would require a unanimous vote?
I'm struggling with this one because I do not agree with this motion at all, and I really don't believe that it is an emergency.
I would like you to consider that Dr. Ross's point that we had to ask these people to do this. They didn't volunteer. And so when I initially saw the request, I was opposed because I figured, why did you volunteer if you didn't have the time? But considering that we had to find people to review the book to begin with, and then considering how we open ourselves up, I'm just saying. But I'm just, we talk about this all the time. Anybody can sue anybody for anything. So we're just putting it all out there. My concern is, what if we don't give the extension and these people decide that they're not going to review the book? Then it's going to take longer anyway, because now we have to assemble a new review committee. That could not happen, but I'm just weighing all the options.
I feel like we're just giving people excuses. And that's not acceptable. It's not acceptable to say that there's an emergency because an author can sue us. It's not acceptable to give into a situation because somebody could quit a committee. That's my opinion. Ms. Huddle, I don't have those policies right in front of me, so, I wish that if you had that, those thoughts, that would have been emailed beforehand, because.
I didn't know.
Because I'm just not, that's not, I don't feel like I've had adequate time to look into that, and this is not like a regular policy that we look at. I don't necessarily think that it's an emergency, other than the fact that Dr. Ross had asked to put this on the discussion agenda, and I felt like it deserved a board vote, so it's under the action agenda so that the board can make that determination. Because I don't have that information in front of me, that's why I'm going to, you called a point of order, and I'm going to say that I think that it needs to go to a vote. There is a motion on the floor, so I'm going to call for the vote. And so all in favor of Mr. Scully's motion?
We're not done with discussion.
Okay.
Okay.
I
was just making a point of order.
I can actually call for the vote, but yeah, you can, if you would like to make a comment, you absolutely can.
Okay, I think Ms. Barnhart asked if the person who filed the complaint had agreed with this, and I think, when we're considering due process, we need to think about that person as well. And if we're going to keep pushing things out, that's not a good look, and I think she made the point that I was on the board when we approved this policy, and it was modeled after the Board of Education's policy, and their policy is 15 days. Ours is already double that, and we had extensive discussion about that when we decided to make that change, because the policy's almost word for word the same. That was that change we made, and we also, I think, expanded the committee to have more people on it because, this kind of thing could happen. But I would just encourage you to think about the rights of the person that filed this complaint, and, 30 days should be enough time to read a book and look at some reviews online.
All right, I'm going to call for the vote now. All in favor of Mr. Scully's motion? So Mr. Scully's motion was to approve the District Review Committee's extension from November 8th to November 30th. So all in favor, Mr. Scully? Do I have two? All opposed? 4 abstaining? Mr. Satterfield. So that motion fails.